Hey guys, Megnat here, and I'm attracted to this matchup. Now, for those of you wondering why I said that, is because I'm trying to come up with a catchphrase for my channel. But anyways, let's get on to the matchup. Today I'm going to be making a matchup between Avatar Aang versus Avatar Korra. Now, before I begin, I just want to say, obviously I'm going to use Aang when he was a kid versus Korra, because if I use adult Aang versus Korra, she's screwed, period. Now, some of you who might not know about Avatar and the series, so let me just give a brief introduction to it. It's in the beginning, it was basically in the old days, but the only difference were there were many cool and weird looking creatures, and second, some of the people in the world were able to bend the primary elements, which was earth, water, air, fire. And if you're, well, really skilled at it, you can also learn the secondary bending abilities like metal bending, lightning bending, and so on. Now that that's cleared up, let's talk about Aang. Aang was born to two unknown air nomads, and he was basically growing up as a carefree, childish young boy. However, at that time, the airbending teachers said knew that Aang was going to be the next Avatar in this time. For those of you who don't know what the Avatar is the one person who is not only capable of bending all the four primary elements, but is also the bridge between the spirit world and the physical world. The teachers, however, decided to keep this a secret from Aang because he was still young at the time. It was around like the age of 11. So they kept it a secret from him for a while, but after a while, the firebenders who wanted to dominate the world, they decided to try and look for the Avatar first, because he's the one person who could stop their leader, the Fire Lord, Ozai. So they figured out that the next airbender was supposed to be born in one of the air nomads, and the airbenders were starting to fear that a war would soon come afoot. Can't believe I just said afoot. So the teachers decided to tell Aang that he's supposed to be the next airbender. It kind of surprised him at first, but he still went on with his life. The only problem was that most of his friends didn't really talk to him anymore because they knew that Aang would become powerful and he has more responsibilities. But he was still happy because he had one airbending teacher named Master Gyatso, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And the teacher, he let Aang feel like a kid. He didn't push too many responsibilities on him. Everything was going fine until some, airbending assholes, the teachers, told Gyatso that he was being too soft on Aang, and they made the decision to send Aang to the Eastern Air Nomad. Aang overheard this, and he decided to run away with his pet bison named Appa. But they were both trapped in a storm and almost drowned. But Aang unconsciously activated the Avatar state, and he protected himself and Appa in a type of iceberg using a combination of water bending and air bending. After 100 years, two natives of the southern water tribe reawoken Aang, and Aang later on realized that all the firebenders killed all the airbenders. All the airbenders are dead, so Aang's basically the last of his kind. And as he decided to redeem himself by saving the world against the Fire Nation. Korra's origin is actually pretty simple. One minute you see a little fat kid bending fire, earth, and water. Then the next thing you know, you see a grown girl trying to keep peace in the world. Now let's talk about their abilities. First off, they're both avatars, which means they're both able to bend the four primary elements. But for each element, each of these avatars are able to bend the element at some certain level, one level higher than the other. So let's talk about each element. When it comes to airbending, Aang definitely is better than Korra, but it's not just because he was born in one of the air nomads. See those tattoos around his body? They're not just for style. They're actually air mastery tattoos. You don't just wear them, you earn them. When you master airbending, you gain these tattoos. And the thing is, Aang got these tattoos when he was around 11 or 12 years old. He was the youngest person in history to ever master airbending. He even made like new techniques called the air scooter. You know, when you see him riding on a ball of wind and riding it like a, well, scooter. Korra's had trouble learning airbending at first, because with airbending you need to be gentle, patient and everything, and Korra was the exact opposite of that. But she later on learns it when she was fighting against the main villain in season 1. She's good at it. She even learned the air scooter as well, but in my opinion, she's not at the same level as Aang. When it comes to water bending, Korra's better, and it's also not just because Korra was born in one of the water tribes. You see, in season 1 of Avatar Last Airbender, Aang was actually doing better feats when it came to waterbending than Katara, who was a native of the waterbending tribe. But later on, Katara met another waterbending master who taught her more techniques, and Aang was in focus at the time, so she became better than him again. When it comes to firebending, it seems that they're fairly equal at it. For Aang, he actually had the opportunity to learn firebending before waterbending and earthbending by another firebending master. And because of his impatience to learn firebending, he actually injured Katara at one time, burning her ass. But she was able to heal herself with waterbending. From that day on, he thought that firebending was destructive and didn't use it again. It was only until season 4, Prince Zuko decided to teach Aang firebending and teach him that firebending is not only destructive. As for Korra, she always been able to firebend actually, even when she was a kid. And actually, it's the best element for her. It's the most used element she uses in battle because she's very impatient, reckless, and it's like the best emotions to have when it comes to firebending. In fact, even though she's a waterbender, she still uses firebending a lot more. In fact, waterbending is one of her least used elements. And then there's earthbending. This one is a little more complicated. You see, for Aang, he had trouble learning earthbending at first because earthbending is pretty much like fire and water. It's like the polar opposite. Air is when you have to be soft, gentle, and try to avoid fights, while earthbending is more like being tough and having that warrior spirit. He had trouble learning it at first, but he did learn it after a while, and he became quite good at it and even used it a lot more in battle. But when Aang uses earthbending, he mostly uses it for defensive strategies. He creates like big walls and pillars to protect him and his friends. As for Korra, she's always been able to learn earth as well, even as a kid, but she mostly uses earthbending for offensive type of strategies. So for Aang, he's better in earthbending when it comes to being defensive, and Korra's better in earthbending when it comes to being offensive. So that's fairly equal.